Lame apologetics. That's what I want to talk about today because I spoke about it before. I'm tired of lame apologetics, and I'm talking about Night Court in its fifth season lame. I'm not here calling any specific apologists lame because they're not lame, man. They're the coolest. Just look at their YouTubes. They got sweet tats, slick studios, fast cars. They got all the babes. Wait, I'm thinking of Motley Crue. Well, the point is, the apologetics are lame, not necessarily the person, because they can't get past their person and feeling like they're insulted all the time. They're so vain, they think this is about them. I could care less about the person, all right? The apologist could be the coolest guy ever, okay? He could be super based, you know? His name could be Bassy, Ace of Base McChatty, right? He's a total alpha with a string of betas worshiping him, which he rapes for money, making him just a step below God, or just a totally unproductive individual who doesn't want to make money doing anything productive. I'm not sure which. Well, anyway, he could have the whole Bassy superponent image, but still have lame and lazy apologetics. Now, what inspired this video was one apologist's critique of another apologist. Now, what you're going to see is he obviously called out Jay Dyer because he's super famous simply for the views. I'm pretty sure that it had nothing to do with, edifying others or really offering a good critique, which we'll just see a little bit of, but was simply just to bring attention to his channel. And to be honest, I only listened to 20 minutes because I'm not a masochist. It was so boring and got too many things wrong so fast that I simply cannot listen to it anymore. And that's why I'm using this video really as a means of criticizing apologetics as a whole. And I'll just start talking a little bit as I get the videos queued up. And because what should interest us about apologetics should be knowledge, truth, right? For some of us, it's because we're outside the church. We want to be in the church. We want to know Jesus Christ. We want to be saved. Other of us are much more comfortable in our faith. We know our faith tradition. We love our faith tradition. And so it's just more intellectually interesting more than anything, right? So it's not like we need apologetics because, we're still searching for the truth or something like that. Many of us we find it interesting. And I'm one of those people who find it interesting. I love my faith. I'm an Orthodox Christian. I love Jesus Christ. I love what the Orthodox Church teaches. I love that there's salvation, the sacraments of the church. And so my interest in apologetics has nothing to do with chip on the shoulder. I got something to prove, or I got to make money, or I need acolytes, or anything to that effect. So that's why when people have ultra lame apologetics, because they're looking to build a brand or something, that bothers me, because at least have good apologetics. You can be the coolest guy ever. In fact, it might not even be true about you. It's just what it looks like. That's all I'm saying. It just looks like that. So what I'm going to do is, and I apologize in advance, I'll do a little bit of mystery science theater with the advertisements. I'm going to play some clips. I'm going to offer some commentary, and we will take it from there. And so
at Interview Kickstart,
Interview Kickstart, guys, it will help you get a better job so you don't have to become an online apologist, and you'll have more money to send to their Patreons.
And yet, they still don't have an answer. It's not like, well, they gave us an answer in 1870. No, we're still waiting. Still waiting on the Orthodox to give us an answer on that one. So at least we have been able to provide an answer when it comes to primacy and papal infallibility in 1870. We're still waiting on you guys to give us an answer here when it comes to primacy in the church. You can't get organized enough to even come together and discuss it, let alone dogmatize it. So, this is just an extremely weak argument, again, designed to target impressionable, ignorant people who don't think of, well, wait, let me ask this. How is this consistent with Eastern Orthodox ecclesiology and Eastern Orthodoxy itself?
All right, so we could see an answering awful arguments J. Dyer edition. So it's really just a way to get clicks. It's kind of a fun, let's say something positive. It's a fun thing to call a show. Obviously, by picking J. Dyer, it's a call for attention as well. Now, look at the argument he made, and in the context of calling something an awful argument. He said, well, we have a way of, we've settled our issue with primacy. The Orthodox have no means to, they never have. And this is a somewhat peculiar argument because the Orthodox in the 1800s issued two different synodical responses to Roman Catholicism, and particularly the papacy, the filioque, and also the Immaculate Conception. And so it's somewhat strange because Mike wasn't Orthodox for as long as J. Dyer was Roman Catholic. I didn't count the years, but it's not like he should have been totally unaware of this. He's got a lot of books, as J. Dyer does, in their bookshelves. I presume that they read these things. And for whatever reason, it just skips his mind. Now, just so people are aware, there was the letter of the patriarchs in 1848. In paragraphs 11 and 17, they touch upon, and in lesser extent, the paragraphs in the middle, they touch upon the issue of authority in the Orthodox Church and synodical authority, and even the reception of the Orthodox laity. That's within that letter in 1848, and it's a pan-Orthodox letter. I believe even the Synod in the Moscow Patriarchate has received this retrospectively, and so this is a pan-Orthodox document, answers the question. But more specifically, I want to bring your attention to paragraph 16 of the Patriarchal Encyclical of Constantinople in 1895. So I'm going to stop sharing screen and share that screen so that way we could read it. It's going to be small letters, but you could go to google.com, Patriarchal Encyclical 1895. And paragraph 16 says, each particular self-governing church, both in East and West, was totally dependent and self-administered in the time of the 7 ecumenical councils. And just as the bishops of the self-governing churches, the East, so also those of Africa, Spain, Gaul, Germany, and Britain, managed the affairs of their own churches, each by their local synods, the Bishop of Rome having no right to interfere, and he himself also was equally subject and obedient to the decrees of synods. But important questions which needed the sanction of the universal church, right, this issue of primacy and how we solve church-wide issues, an appeal was made to an ecumenical council, which alone was and is the supreme tribunal in the universal church. Such was the ancient constitution of the church, but the bishops were independent of each other and each entirely free with his own bounds, obeying only the synodical decrees, and they sat as equal one to another in synods. Some people don't say that's crazy. That's literally what Saint Cyprian says in the Carthaginian Council in the 250s. So anyway, moreover, none of them ever laid claim to monarchical rights over the universal church, and sometimes certain ambitious bishops of Rome raised excessive claims to an absolutism unknown to the church. Such were duly reproved and rebuked, like in Constantinople II. The assertion, therefore, of Leo XIII, when he says in his encyclical that before the period of the great Photius, the name of the Roman throne was holy among all the peoples of the Christian world, and that the East, like the West, with one accord and without opposition, was subject to the Roman pontiff as lawful successor, so to say, of the Apostle Peter, and consequently vicar of Jesus Christ on earth, is reproved to be an accurate and a manifest error. And so people are aware that this isn't some sort of Orthodox cope. You know, this is something that mainstream Roman Catholic scholars admit, Anglican scholars admit. Everyone admits this. This is not a debate intellectually. But be that as it may, for some reason, this just doesn't exist in rad-trad Roman Catholic apologetics. Now, people have to be aware there's plenty of great Roman Catholics that just aren't rad-trads, that are generally based in reality. And so my issue is not with those people. My issue is with the online echo chamber of historical falsity. All right? That is what my issue is with. And so it's interesting. So I'll be like Mike. I'm gonna bash you guys, the listeners today. generally you kind of avoid bashing people's audiences because those are people trying to convince. If you call them morons, they're less likely to be convinced, right? So it's not good apologetics generally to call someone a moron. They're stupid and young, so they're easily duped. All right, well, appeal to people's reason instead of just calling them stupid and young, because what you're really doing by calling one group of people stupid and young is telling your own audience, but you're not 17, you're 19 years old, and rub their shoulders and you're better than them. You're a great guy. So really that's not an argument either. You're just making an ad hominem against a group of people so you could try to make your own audience feel smart when ultimately we should be trying to have humility. All right. And so it's the title of the show is Make Apologetics Great Again. I'm talking about guys like James White, and they actually did good, interesting, respectful, debates and things to that effect. This is what we should have. Probably a good thing to do is not to bash a whole half the audience or the whole half of the group of people you're trying to convince is generally not a good idea. So I think that's something that I found somewhat humorous in the critique that was given. So anyway, we see the answer to Mike Lofton's question is, in fact, the Orthodox Church made 2 synodical documents in the 19th century alone to address the issue. So it's kind of peculiar, but be that as it may, doesn't make him a bad person. If he understood it, he would never say that, right? Just like if Jay Dyer made a bad argument, which is what Mike Lofton's alleging, he would never make a bad argument if he thought it was bad, right? So by kind of joking that it's awful and stupid and you're playing to a stupid crowd, I just find it ironic that you would say something so obviously falsifiable. All right, it's just doesn't reflect well upon the audience that would accept it and all that fun stuff. So anyway, I'm getting ready to share screen on the next clip. And in this clip, we see what is popularly called online cope, but it's sort of more accurately how a rad trad apologist would try to justify the fact that we've got councils that call a pope, particular Honorius, a heretic. And so you have to now explain away the fact that he's called a heretic. Now, obviously, even Roman Catholics until Vatican I found this problematic. Scholars find this problematic. Anyone with basic common sense calls this problematic. So it would be with a degree of humility when I'd say, well, most likely it looks like this, but let me give you some other idea. But this is not what the rad trad apologetics does. Instead, it tries to impose this kind of foreign category of thought onto the past. And what you're going to see is, well, material heresy which is what Pope Honorius was. He was a material heretic. That's really not heresy. And so it's not a big deal that he's called a heretic, right? And so that's kind of the gist of this clip. And I'm going to click share audio and we will watch it. And man, I hope I get the right one. As people well know, I am not a technical expert. So I'm going to have it because I'm great at this technology, but at least the video that I'm responding to didn't quite exactly have things queued up perfectly either. So all of us have this issue. All right. So skip ad.
Yeah, we're aware of Honorius, Jay. They were actually aware of that at Vatican I, and you know that. Obviously, there are ways to reconcile the case of Honorius with papal infallibility. We did that in 1870. We do it to this day. I ultimately don't have a major issue with saying that Honorius was condemned. We could even say as a heretic, although I think at best he was a material heretic. I don't think there was any form to his heresy. But in theory, we could talk about actually a formally heretical pope, and I've done that many, many times. I have many shows on it. You can just type my name in, can the pope be deposed or something like that, and you'll see videos come up where I talk about this. So ultimately, I don't flinch when somebody brings up Honorius. That, to me, that is a sign of somebody who is ignorant about the subject, that or they are just deliberately being misleading. I don't know.
All right. So again, that's awfully peculiar because this is an issue for Roman Catholic scholars, for Roman Catholics in good standing in the 1800s. For most scholars today, it's an issue, right? Because you just heard there, well, he could be a material heretic. He could be a formal heretic. He could be all sorts of heretics. All right. Well, it makes it kind of difficult to swallow that a correct understanding of the Sixth Ecumenical Council, Council III, would be that the Pope is infallible and that everyone understood that, but implicitly they understood these categories of material and formal heresies, and the Pope happened to be both. And they, without mentioning those categories of thought, were ascribing that to Honorius, but ascribing Vatican I infallibility to St. Pope Agatho. You know, it's not a very good argument, and that's why most scholars don't believe in this, right? It doesn't mean it's impossible. That's not my point, right? If you categorize everything enough, you could make it possible in some theoretical sense. I don't doubt that. Do I think there's a lot of historical credibility? Do others think there's a lot of historical credibility? The answer is absolutely not. So that's hardly the point. But one thing I'll do following up on this is not only do I want to say it's not right to make the personal attack, like say, no, anyone who says this is stupid or trying to deceive you, when it's the majority position of scholarship. So again, that's awfully peculiar and misleading. But I want to now give detail of why Mike Lofton thinks that the Sixth Ecumenical Council seriously asserted the infallibility of the Pope. And you're going to find that he's going to claim, they're saying the papacy, you know, can never err, but you'll never find that word papacy there. All right. And so that's one problem. I'm going to play his response and get that queued up. The next problem is that this issue was already responded to in detail months ago by myself. And so I'm going to play my own clip. And the reason I'm going to play my own clip, not after his clip, is because I already made a response to this. And that's why I told you guys I'm getting tired of this, because it's the same old disproven garbage over and over. Right? And so it's lame, it's boring. We want to make apologetics great again.
We the People holsters.
Oh, cool. Look at that.
Outside the waistband paddle holster.
Paddle holster.
With the real tree edge camera
real
pattern.
Tree edge.
Let's take
again on the blade. That's a South Park joke. So that being said, we have his clip now queued up. I'm gonna click go in just a second. But I just want to say that if I was personally attacked and said I had nothing worth saying, and they made fun of how I talked, they brought up stuff about my personal life, stuff like you don't have to do if you're charitable, right? Supposedly Jay Dyer is this meanie, but as far as I could tell, Jay Dyer never did a stream of 1 hour of Mike Lofton making fun of how he talks, you know, taking clips where he says ums, ahs and stuff, and then bringing up stuff about his family. Those who live in glass houses should not throw stones. No one should be bringing up that sort of stuff. Making apologetics great again is winning the arguments, is bringing up the facts. That's what we should be talking about. All right. So the question here, because I'm not trying to critique Mike Lofton, I just said he's cool. He's got tattoos and stuff, right? He's cool. He's totally alpha. He's Chatty McBasey base, right? So he's totally awesome and cool. I'm totally lame and beta, right? So it's not that I wish I was cool as Mike. That's not the issue. The issue is it doesn't matter how cool he is. His arguments, his responses to Jay Dyer are historically false. So, and if he actually listened to these things and read these things instead of just personally attacked people, maybe he would know this. So I'm not sure. Maybe he does, and he just wants to say this stuff anyway, but I'd really prefer not to believe that. Okay. So I'm going to play his clip, and then I'm going to play my response.
About how the Roman See is unblemished even to this day. We've done entire shows on this, so just maybe go and check out. Type in maybe Michael Lofton, Pope Agatho. It should come up where we go over the text itself. We go over not only just Agatho, but over quite a few other papal texts in the first 7 ecumenical councils, including Pope Leo, and some interesting things that he said there in his letters. Now, the point is, he appeals to the apostolic see. He says Peter himself, in his role, is active still in his successor in the apostolic see, that is the Bishop of Rome. And he says it's unblemished to this day. Now, how can that be reconciled with Honorius? As an Eastern Orthodox, how do you reconcile that? Because I know as a Catholic how I can reconcile Agatho's words that is read out loud to the council. The council accepts, which is an even more difficult problem for those who maintain conciliar fundamentalism, as I've noted before. They accept it. And yet he says that, even to this day, in spite of the case of Honorius, even to this day, the papacy is unblemished. What do you make of that? How is that?
All right. So now we won't have to worry about an advertisement. I'm going to play my response, and being that I already made this response to that exact part, I'm going to skim this book that I'm mailing Credo from Yaroslav Pelikan. It's being mailed to Father Paisi in Cambodia. And so we'll have a show in the future because he's reading this book. He wanted me to get it. But I'm skimming it first, so that way I know what to ask him about when we do a show on this book. So being that I already gave response, I'm just going to read a little bit, and you could listen to that response because response already exists. Here we go. This one from St. Pope Agatho. In Constable 3, Session 18, there's statements of his that make it seem like he is an infallible bishop and things that would teach Vatican I papacy. And that's in Session 2. But if people leave out in Session 18, it says, Honorius, who was Pope of the Elder Rome, right, about 40 years before, disseminating in novel terms amongst the Orthodox people and heresy, similar to the mad and wicked doctrine of the impious, Apollinaris, Severus, and Themistris. All right, so if the Council 3 supposedly accepted that the Bishop of Rome was infallible, it'd be very strange that they would later in that council, in its decree in Session 18, then say that a pope taught heresy, right? Disseminating in novel terms among the Orthodox people, right? Which would actually be that definition of ex cathedra, teaching from the seat of Peter to the whole church. Well, we see an ecumenical council saying Honorius did just that and was heresy. So who is infallible in the mind of the council? I'm going to tell you, if we read here's the quote, that's super important. And it could be taken both ways. The quote is, the Apostolic Church of Christ has both in prosperity and in adversity always held and defended with energy, which it will be proved by the grace of Almighty God, has never erred from the path of the apostolic tradition. Right? So who is the Apostolic Church of Christ? Well, Pope St. Agatho probably was actually meaning Rome, right? And the actual council clearly interpreted this to mean the whole church, right? The Apostolic Church of Christ is the whole church, right? We believe one holy Catholic and apostolic church, right? So it would make sense that this would be a reference to the whole church. And it's actually still possible that St. Pope Agatho actually intended to mean this was the whole church, though my personal reading was he intended this to be taken both ways. But be that as it may, let's look at this a little further. In Pope St. Agatho's letter, he calls the church that's infallible the spiritual mother. But in Augustine's Confessions, for example, that term spiritual mother is referred to the whole church, right? So the spiritual mother of the Roman Empire, according to Pope St. Agatho, according to Augustine, happens to be the whole church, not just Rome. And he also mentioned this again in letter 34, paragraph 3. So Confessions, book 7, paragraph 1, letter 34, paragraph 3. Why is this relevant? Because if a Latin bishop steeped in Augustine would have said the Apostolic Church, spiritual mother of the Roman Empire, as St. Pope Agatho's letter did, wouldn't it make sense he's quoting Augustine? And if he's quoting Augustine, chances are he is purposely referring to the whole church, right? Instead of radically changing the theology of Augustine, taking the terminology from him. Now, even if St. Pope Agatho was being a little more clever than that and maybe a little speaking on both sides of his mouth, the council would have had plenty there to accept that this was reference to the whole church, because they later decreed the Pope was a heretic. Now, someone say, well, objection, is this kind of two-faced of the council to call a Pope a heretic and then accept that a Pope could be infallible? Well, no, because one, they didn't think this was about the Pope. They thought it was about the whole church. And two, even if they knew that the Latin bishops that were there, the legates of Rome, would have had in mind these higher papal pretenses, they weren't against these sort of flatteries and high-minded language. Now, this is a quote from Constantinople III, but it's not one I have read. It's from Papal Primacy, from its origins to present, page 50. I believe it's from a Ubi Patris Flagellum. It says, "Rejoice, O city of Zion, summit of the world and the empire. Constantine ornamented you with purple and crowned you with faith, and the gates of hell shall not prevent against your Orthodox empire." Right? So we see Matthew 16:18, and it's applied to the Roman Empire. And clearly, the Roman Empire had all sorts of heresies that were propagated. I mean, that's what Constantinople III was held over. So it would have not been strange to the bishops taking part to use this sort of flowery language and not take it literally. So that is one objection to taking this letter of St. Pope Agatho and saying it proves the Vatican I papacy. Second, it looks like he's quoting Augustine, and Augustine applies this to the whole church, not specifically Church of Rome. And three, the council calls another pope a heretic. And so it's unreasonable to presume that they were consenting to the idea that a pope of Rome is infallible, while then calling another pope, saying he was teaching the whole church heresies. So that's enough about that. Lastly, all right, so enough reading time for me, and I'll get back to just responding here. But so, as you can see, when you actually read what's said by St. Pope Agatho, he uses a somewhat ambiguous term, the Apostolic Church of Christ. Now, he calls himself that. The Church of Rome is called that all the time as well. But the fact that he also calls it the Mother Church is a term in the Latin tradition from St. Augustine, which speaks of not Rome, but the whole universal Orthodox and Catholic Church. So it's sort of an uphill battle to actually say that the council would have received something from St. Pope Agatho to mean that it was infallible, when it could have easily been interpreted to be about the whole church. And also St. Pope Agatho was using a terminology which would have been applicable to the whole church. So my point is, there has been a response from the Orthodox side, but Mike was too busy with joke videos to, I guess, pay attention to it. And if it's not a very good response, then someone could take issue with the reference from Augustine's Confessions. I think it's book 7. And someone could take issue with exactly how Apostolic Church of Christ is used by St. Pope Agatho, which is why, by the way, I personally think he was trying to say the Roman idea, but also let the other side take their interpretation as well. Because I do think that a Roman reading is possible and somewhat deliberate. So I have a pretty nuanced position with that letter. But the point is, there has been a response. And to act aghast like there's no response to this is somewhat concerning for people that have read up on the issue. You would presume better than that. So we now have another clip. And what's really concerning about this, because this also included a recent debate on Pints of Aquinas with Father Patrick and with Eric Ybarra, is Eric Ybarra cited what was either a forgery or simply just the Latin manuscript of Nicaea II. And he used that as evidence that the whole church received a papal teaching from Pope Adrian I. The problem with that is, obviously, the council was held in Greek, and the Greek minutes have none of this. And so it's an awfully peculiar gotcha moment where no credible scholar, no credible interpreter would say that the council accepted the Latin rendering of those minutes. Obviously, they accepted the Greek rendering, which, not so coincidentally, lacks all the papal prerogatives. All right, but I'm going to play the clip because, Mike Sagaston thinks he's got you with it, and I think people should see it. and I'll try to get the advertisement out of the way. VRBO, vacation home. I think that'd be pretty cool to have. To be honest, I wouldn't want a vacation home. It would just be more work and something else to worry about. Another roof to leak. I don't know. I'm pretty lazy. I don't have to worry about that. You know what I was doing before the stream, other than taking care of family and hanging out with my wife? I was putting tar on the driveway, right? I got enough with one house. I don't want to worry about a vacation house somewhere. God bless the people that they've got so much energy, they don't care. So anyway, here's the clip. I'm going to play it.
2. It's read at session 2 before the Council Fathers. And it's noted how the Bishop of Rome is the successor of Peter, and how it is going to endure as his successor forever. In other words, the position of primacy that Rome holds is going to be intact forever. It can't be transferred to Constantinople or elsewhere. It can't lose the faith and become defective. It's going to remain faithful. Let me actually read it. I think I have that one pulled up here.
All right, it's interesting just so you guys know.
I got to get it set up to where
A whole
I can see
point-
the computer
a
right
whole
here in
point
front of
is
me.
being
I'll probably
made
do that within the next few days. I
Over
didn't have a chance to set it
the
up.
less likely set of minutes that
Here
would
it
be
is.
used at that council.
For
almost
the blessed
entirely not the
Peter
Latin minutes.
himself, the chief of the apostles who sat in the apostolic see, left the chiefship of his apostolate and pastoral care to his successors, who are to sit in his most holy seat forever. Notice that. They're to sit in his most holy seat forever.
See, the whole point.
Not until they teach heresy, until they teach the filioque or something like that. Forever. And the power of authority which he received from the Lord our Savior. Notice that he believes that Peter was singled out among the apostles and received authority directly from Christ. These are the papal claims. He too bestowed and delivered by divine command to the pontiffs, his successors. So the authority, the divine authority that is passed to Peter is passed to his successors, the pontiffs. This is taught at the Seventh Ecumenical Council. As an Orthodox, how do you understand that?
All right. Well, Mike should know because I've told him live on his show that's not in the Greek minutes. That's in the Latin minutes. And you don't even need to buy a book to know this. I'm going to show you guys. I got the open source translation from the late 1800s brought up. And so that way I could share it on screen. So I'm going to share that in a second. And so that way you've been told, you respond to a video with jokes when the video had this information. What's your response to not knowing? I mean, I really want to know that. I don't know. But there it is. In the Latin, this paragraph runs as follows. For the proofs of his dignity are found in the sacred authors and that unbounded veneration paid to him by all the faithful everywhere throughout the world. For the Lord have made him who's keeper of the keys of heaven, prince over all. And this privilege was conferred upon him by the same divine person by whom the keys of the kingdom of heaven were granted. For he that was endued with such singular honor had before him honored to make that confession of faith on which the Church of Christ is founded. A blessedness of reward followed this blessed confession, a preaching of which the Holy Catholic Church has been enlightened, and from which other churches have taken the documents of their faith. For the blessed Peter, Prince of the Apostles, who first presided in the Apostolic See, bequeathed the principality of the apostleship and the pastoral care to his successors, who throughout all ages should sit in his most holy chair, to whom he left the power of authority. So you see, throughout all ages, and the translation Mike was reading was forever. For just as was bestowed on him by our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, so in the same way did he hand it down by divine command to the pontiffs, his successors, by whose tradition it is that we venerate the holy images of Christ, of his holy mother, the apostles, and all the saints. All right, so we see right there, in the Latin, this paragraph runs as follows. So that begs the question, oh, I made it small. I read it for you. There, it's big. You could click rewind, you could click pause, and you could read it. There it is, all right? So this is minute 34:30. Click pause and read it if you want it more. I already respond to this by reading what the Greek minutes said, what obviously all the Greek Orthodox bishops in the East accepted, all right? And I'm going to read my book again because I already responded to this. It shouldn't have to be responded to again. All right. So I'm going to close his video. And just guys, so you know, if you got questions, you could start asking them, because I only watched 20 minutes of video. I couldn't take anymore. You know, it could have been a good video, but we got to make apologetics great again. They're in a bad, sorry state. I don't know if the Chinese have taken our apologetics. I don't know where they went, but they're not doing good right now. All right, so I'm going to share screen, stop screen. Come on. All right. So I'm going to share screen, and you'll see there's already a response, the Greek minutes quoted, and it just apparently wasn't worth Eric Yerbar's time and the debate over the schism. It wasn't worth anyone's time when I did the review of Eric Yerbar's debate. It wasn't worth the time when I did 5 top papal memes. Apparently worth nobody's time, but here it is. It's worth your time right now. Pope Adrian I. We have another quote from Nicaea II before we get in Pope Adrian's letter that supposedly teaches Vatican I papacy. In Nicaea II, in session 6, it says the following about a Pope of Rome. It says, these holy ecumenic councils and those which preceded Sergius of Constantinople, Cyrus Alexander, Honorius of Rome, and their monothelite party received, but nevertheless they have been anathematized as heretics by the Catholic Church, for having taught there was but one will in operation, the two natures of our Jesus Christ. Have taught, right? So
you can't do
there's
that
St. Honorius taught a heresy. He was anathematized as a heretic, and he taught this heresy. So that's what the Ecumenical Council says. So kind of strange that the council would teach that Pope could teach heresy, but then they would have understood that Pope Adrian's letter taught Vatican I papacy. But it's even less complicated than that. The Latin that the Roman Catholic apologists are quoting differs tremendously with the Greek manuscript of Nicaea II. And so the Latin's either a forgery, or it just was never accepted by the Greeks, or for that matter, most of the West, because the Carolingian Empire disputed Nicaea II, and there was Hinchmar in France, who likewise disagreed with the Pope having any sort of primacy over France, and there's many statements in Hinchmar over that fact. So it shows no one accepted this, besides maybe a court party in Rome itself, presuming it was actually even written in the 8th century that way. But here is what is in session 2 of the Council of Nicaea in Pope Adrian's letter in the Latin manuscript, right? So this is, almost no one accepts this, but here's what it says. The blessed Peter, Prince of the Apostles, who first presided in the Apostolic See, bequeathed the principality of the apostleship and the pastoral care of to his successors, who throughout all ages should sit in his most holy chair, to whom he left the power of authority, for just as it was bestowed on him by our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, so in the same way did he hand it down by divine command to the pontiffs. Right? So that's in a Latin-only manuscript that no one accepted. The council did not accept because it was in Greek, and the other Western Christians did not accept. But here's what the Greek manuscript says, the one that the council actually accepted. And let your divine receive power, give all honor to the most holy Roman Church of these chief apostles, right? 2 apostles would be Peter and Paul, to whom power has been given by God the Word himself to loose and to bind sins in heaven and on earth, for they will become the guardians of your kingdom and will subdue all the barbarian nations under your feet. Wherever you go, they will make you victorious. Now, these same holy and chief apostles who laid the foundation of the Catholic and Orthodox faith have left a written law that all who ever succeed to their thrones should maintain the same faith and should continue in it even unto the end. Right? So all the Vatican I stuff is gone. And it's saying that essentially all bishops that inherit from Peter and Paul should maintain the same faith. Nothing about infallibility or anything to the fact. And it's most curious that if the church always believed in Vatican I papacy, why everyone resisted it in the time of Pope Victor, everyone resisted it in the time of Pope St. Stephen, everyone resisted it in the time of Pope St. Hormisdas, everyone resisted it in the 6th Ecumenical Council under Pope St. Agatho, and everyone resisted it in Nicaea II with the letter of Pope Adrian. And so this is where I'm just going to say to the audience, we just looked at everything. All right, so we just looked at everything. What more is there to say? All these arguments have been responded to 1,000 times would be exaggeration, but at least in my experience, 3 times. There's only so much you could repeat it. Well, this would be the 4th time. There's only so many times you could repeat this. And so I think it's really good, instead of saying, oh, I'm going to pwn Jay Dyer, or someone's going to respond, I'm going to pwn my, it's not about pwning people. All right. It's not about World of Warcraft. All right. You don't have to get into their personal lives. You don't have to call them idiots or anything like that. The point is, you could dispute their arguments. Sadly, for the popular rad trad side right now, the arguments they're using are so easily disprovable, so patently wrong. There's no good response to them. This is why, again, most mainstream Roman Catholic scholarship doesn't take any of this stuff seriously, because there is no good response to it. So I would say that I'm going to have some closing comments, but I think we need to focus on the facts, not on the people. A person could be a scoundrel, could be absolutely right. A person could be great and could be absolutely wrong. All right. And so ultimately, anyone listening to these videos, you shouldn't be investing personally in the person, right? We're just human beings, right? We do all the same bodily functions that you do. All right. Ultimately, we should be someone who helps you learn the scriptures, learn the fathers, grow closer to God. That's the goal. But when we get into all this personality stuff and people egg people on because they want what's Christian and what's good and what's pure to be verbal MMA. This is wrong. And that has to change. That's what we got to make apologetics great again. We don't want to make it about personalities or opponents or scoring points. That might be a good business model, but it's not good for people's souls. So anyway, I'll start answering some questions. I can't go back to everything because it's too much, but we have this question from Max. Do you know if that Latin rendered in Nicaea II is pre-schism? I have not looked into the manuscripts. I do not own Father Richard Price's copy of Nicaea II. I read the open source version. And so maybe I should spend the $40, and if so, I'm not going to ask for the money. If one day, if I spend the $40, so I get so curious, we sometimes know the age of these manuscripts, but just as a point of comparison, it's very rare that we have manuscripts that are within like 50, 100, whatever years. Like, so for example, the Latin manuscripts of Saint Pope John VIII during the 8th Ecumenical Council, Constantinople IV, the Latin manuscripts are from like the 11th century, 12th century, and they were in the monastery Monte Cassino. So that was after the schism, and that was 100 years after Nicaea II. And so it's very common that we have these things after the fact. And so there's a good chance, and I'm just speaking generally, I haven't looked into the manuscripts. Like I said, Father Richard Price would probably give the best information on that. Would probably be post-schism, but that still doesn't mean that it really didn't say such things in the Latin version, though it is worded pretty strongly. It'd be somewhat peculiar, but you start seeing things very similar to that in the 9th century as well. And as I pointed out, what's Hinchmar of Reims, I believe that's where he was bishop, what's Hinchmar responding to if they weren't asserting something that muscular, right? Where did the 11th century schismatic papacy come from if there wasn't some development before then? So I think there's a good chance it was pre-schism, but even if it wasn't, it doesn't mean that the post-schism document doesn't faithfully repeat what was really a deficient Latin manuscript that was never, the Latin letter was never read during the actual council. Clearly, the Greek minutes show what was actually read, because no one would accept what that Latin letter would say. But we have this from Yevgeny. Have you read Matthew 16:18? We did. And that's why we see that Matthew 16:18 was rendered in such a fashion that would even applied to the Byzantine Empire. But beyond that, it's important to point out that there are saints like Saint Cyprian of Carthage that take a very specific view of Matthew 16:18 is about Rome. But that's when you have to interpret their words in light of their actions. He rejected papal overreach. So just because, even if it's about specifically the successor of Peter in Rome, which again, about 1/3 of the fathers take that view, so it's not totally illegitimate. That still doesn't mean Vatican I papacy. It's very far from that. In fact, our earliest interpretations of that verse, where Peter's the rock, are from Tertullian and Cyprian, and both rejected the Pope in different respects. Keywords, different respects. So that's something to point out. All right. Now my screen's going to jump forward 1,000 comments probably. Oh, maybe it's not. Maybe you guys are saved to that because for whatever reason, StreamYard is being silly. All right. So, all right, we're going up a little bit. I don't want to get into anything with personal about people, so I'm not going to read those comments. So we have this from Joseph. Remember Pope Vigilius, who's contradicted by an entire ecumenical council, even imprisoned by the Byzantine emperor. He was later admitted he was wrong. He admitted, by the way, his words in Second Constitutum that he's deceived by Satan. Doesn't sound infallible to me at all. The key thing is he taught in the first Constitutum that the church can't condemn people after they're dead, and the second Constitutum he teaches that they could. Both were taught theoretically ex cathedra because he was teaching to the whole church. He explicitly said as such in both of those letters. So I really don't know how Roman Catholics could honestly reconcile that without just from the seat of their pants saying whether or not the church could condemn someone after dead is not a matter of faith or morals. So that's almost like saying, well, then technically speaking, whether the church could condemn anyone at all is disciplinary. We don't know if the church could really do that. And so disciplinary should apply to how the actual doctrine is applied, the how, not whether it's true. Right? Whether it's true is a matter of faith and morals. So I just don't see any reversing from it. And not so coincidentally, some of the minutes of the Fifth Ecumenical Council actually will lack. They lack the first Constitutum, for example. So the Roman Catholic Church might not even known he was teaching this. All they had was the second Constitutum. But again, we know better now because we have more manuscripts. Now, let's see. We have comments. I don't want to get into names, so I'm not reading anything with names. Well, someone says this. How many Roman Catholics will be honest themselves and how many will cling to their tribal identity? Again, if you were born ethnically Roman Catholic, say being born ethnically Orthodox or ethnically Lutheran, there's going to be an allegiance there. That's not altogether illegitimate, right? That'd be like forsaking your family. You know, it's a lot different when people are serial converts to one thing to another. And because I'm a convert from Protestantism to Orthodoxy, someone could accuse me of being such, right? But there's people that convert religions even more times. But again, they don't make them wrong either. We got to base things upon the facts. But I just say, even if someone who's ethnically aligned is wrong and we want them to be in the church, we should at least be understanding that there's a sort of humility about being ethnically aligned. A priest told me the thing about the cradles, he said, is that they're not zealous, but their roots go deep and they're not easily shaken from the faith. So there is much to be grateful and look up to about someone in that circumstance. There is something virtuous about that. Doesn't mean it is virtuous, but there's something virtuous about it. Let's see. We hear that there's Roman Catholic inquirers, and this is what I'm hoping, that a reasonable Roman Catholic would go, wait a second, why was he so confident in bashing this other guy, and he's so flagrantly wrong? So hopefully that'll be something that will lead Roman Catholics to want to look into the Orthodox Church, or if even they stay Roman Catholic, at least be more mainstream Roman Catholic, not this rad-trad echo chamber of falsifiable epistemology. So let's see. The most telling thing to me is that the most traditionalist Catholics have to adopt the most liberal positions Vatican I in order to remain Catholic. Which is true. Like the point Duggan's getting about, people unaware, is those who really care about Vatican I, right? They're the rad-trads, are also very socially conservative, at least on paper. Mike himself isn't. He's actually somewhat of a social liberal, which is refreshing from the echo chamber. But that aside, then they have to say the Pope we have now is awful. He's the end of the world. You know, it's worse than the pornocracy. but Vatican I's totally, absolutely right. It's a weird thing because ultimately it's not like real world Roman Catholics. It's more epistemological. The cradles that are rad trads either become seds, or if they don't, they're not as epistemologically invested. I mean, I hope to have John Colarafi on at the end of the month. We'll be doing stuff on the Formula Hermistas and newly translated letters that he himself has translated. And you'll have a cradle Roman Catholic who's in communion with the Pope giving his opinion, but you'll notice that John Colarafi, he has zero chip on his shoulder, because why would he have to? He was born that. So that's also very refreshing. Let's see. We have just more comments, which I'm not getting into so much. Where are the questions? Let's see. All right, here we go. What can the Orthodox Church do to properly catechize disillusioned Roman Catholics? How can we be sure they accept the true faith and not import heresies from Rome? Well, first we got to do house cleaning ourselves, right? People online think that the Orthodox Church is some sort of return to medieval Russia, and you become this giant bear and you can invade other countries or whatever. It's like some weird Putin stereotype. But in reality, the Orthodox Church is like a lot of other European churches. It tends more liberal than fundamentalist Protestants. And if it weren't for the Holy Spirit and the grace of God, we would be full-blown mainline Protestant liberal, right? And Roman Catholicism is very quickly approaching that. And Orthodoxy in a couple jurisdictions is very quickly approaching that. And it depends at the local parish level what the local parish may be. You can't paint everyone with a broad brush, of course. But so first things first, we need our own house cleaning, right? So it's fun to talk theoreticals online, but Orthodox Church has its own issues with liberalism. I think the main thing is, and this is why I'm going to go plug Apostolic Christian, Charitable Apostolic Christian Discourse, the Discord. I'm going to put the link in the section of this video, which I haven't done yet because I'm lazy. And if you were to, I would just say, I lost my train of thought. I honestly lost my train of thought. So it's late for me here. Catechize disillusioned Roman Catholics. The reason I started that Discord group is because I want somewhere people could have differences of opinion in a kind and respectable and Christian way. One of the rules there is you cannot criticize any personality that's alive. So I could have easily started a Discord server, which was just revolving around Craig Truglia and about bashing everyone I don't like. But that's actually not edifying to anyone, as amusing as that would be. And so I created a Discord group that's not about that. And so what we needed in catechism, something analogous to the Discord group, meaning we bring people in from different faith traditions. We respect what those faith traditions are, but we're not ecumenists. We are clear where we say they're wrong. All right. Now, there's saints that try to baptize things from other faith traditions, and when things are theoretically correct or could be taught in the Orthodox manner, they should be, but we should mince no meat. For example, if I were to use the Latin Filioque from Augustine and as expounded upon by Saint Maximus in the letter of Marinus, I'd say there's a legitimate way you can understand the Filioque that's completely Orthodox, but that is not the dogmatic teaching of the Roman Catholic Church. In fact, they explicitly rejected that in the Council of Florence. And so we need to be respectful, but very stern with what the Orthodox faith is and not be ecumenist. So the real issue is ecumenism when it comes to catechism. And if we're not, then we're going to be teaching the truth. But a lot of Orthodox priests are just kind of straightforward, like they're wrong, we're the only ones that right. And ironically, what they think they're right about is not even correct either. So we got issues too. All right, we got issues too. And so let's see. I've heard that Roman Catholics who join Orthodox Western Rite Parish will sometimes hold on to the veneration of false saints. How can we stop that? I don't know how we can. There is New Skeet Monastery in New York, and they have relics of St. Francis of Assisi. I presume they venerated. They were Roman Catholic converts. So some of this is tolerated at a very high level. So we're not quite like the Ethiopian church. We had Deacon Enoch on the other day, and they flat out have saints on their calendar, which mathematize their saints and stuff like that. Like they venerate St. John of Damascus. So we're not quite at that level. We don't at the official level venerate these people, but at a local level, you'll find people that venerate these guys. And I just say this, if you love the saints, you are faithful like children to what they taught. And so if they say other people aren't saints, then we do not accept them as saints. We can pray for their souls, but we do not accept them as saints. Nor random visions that they're supposedly saints and stuff like that. All right, so let's see. Other Paul, who's a Protestant apologist. Do you believe the way that these apologists use sources as proof texts is evidence of poor or no training in sober historical investigation? I do think that's part of it, because I think most people in apologetics don't have history degrees. Now, believe me, history is a very liberal discipline, like politically speaking, and very Marxist, economically speaking. And so just because like you've studied history doesn't mean like you'll do it very well. That's beside the point. But it does kind of come out. I have to say, I'm not like a history. I'm not a historian prior. I call myself a gentleman historian, right? Like I've got one published work. I read history as an interested person, a somewhat educated level. You know, so sometimes you could see how it's peculiar how people read history. They don't know how to read it professionally. They wouldn't know how a professional reads it. But there's people that are not, they're engineers and stuff, but they could also understand history very well as well. I think the main thing is most apologists have chip on their shoulders. The reason they do it is because they're trying to prove something to themselves. Whether they admit or not, that's my gut feelings. They're trying to prove something to themselves. And that's why they're not so coincidentally, they convert from several religions. They tend to be new converts and things to that effect. And I have to say, I'm personally out of my own cage stage, as they'd say. And so really what keeps me going is I have certain intellectual things I want to say. And if I feel like I'm just saying the same thing over and over, I'm just going to stop because there's no reason to keep going. But, you know, the internet, I spoke to some guy that's Ethiopian, or I knew nothing about Ethiopian Orthodoxy. So there's so many more things to learn, which are so interesting. And that's why I want John Calarafi on, because he's going to read, we're going to read something that's never been translated in English ever. So that's going to be brand new on this channel. So that's going to be some cool stuff. We have, do you think a schism in the Roman Catholic Church is going to happen? I don't think so, actually. I don't think so. I think that they've been liberal for too long, that the schisms that were going to happen already sort of did, and everyone else is in it to win it. That's my opinion. I think we're actually, Orthodox are likely to have a major schism, is my opinion. I don't think the Roman Catholics are necessarily. Let's see. Someone says, I love the server. That's right. Charitable Apostolic Christian Discourse Discord. So there you go. You got someone saying it's great. How do you think us Orthodox unite? It was 2,000 years and there is a major schism. I'm not sure what Elijah Halberg's confession is. So the only way, there's two ways we can unite. Truth and love. We can't brush the truth aside, and we can't do so with hate. Any forceful and so ultimately we need truth, we need love, we need to speak the truth, we need to convince people the truth, and we need love. And the problem is, because there's love, other people, other Canaanite saints, I don't know how you reconcile that. They'd have to like stop loving them. So there's no easy answer, but it has to be truth of the Orthodox teaching and love for our saints, and that's the only answer. All right. We have, unfortunately, many converts are catechized the theology of Romanides and told it's just basic orthodoxy. And I would agree that orthodoxy in the English language is very weak. I have a friend I've known for years now, and we were talking about the atonement the other day on the phone. And he said that my priest told me that not even in Russia do they teach that, you know, Christ died for sins and his blood atoned for sins, which is like basic stuff. And I sent him the video with me and Father John Whiteford on the atonement. And I sent him an article from Father Joshua Shupin. And I sent him pan-Orthodox documents, which again, like this is the actual conciliar teaching of the church. And I said, I'm going to show you, I'm going to send you something just to show you this is not some sort of weird echo chamber. I'm going to send you something from Father Daniel Sazoyev, because his Catechism Law of God is one of the most popular in Russia. And he's very recent. He died in 2009. And right on page 416, it's in the community page of Orthodox Christian theology. He teaches the atonement in the standard manner, not in the fluffy duffy. We don't believe Christ died for sins, or his blood atoned for sins, and weirdness. I mean, obviously, we believe that the scriptures say so. So but there's issues, and the issue is the Orthodox chip on the shoulder. We're not Protestant, we're not Roman Catholic, so we have to deny everything, and you end up not taking even Orthodox positions. You take these positions that only existed in the 20th century. So obviously, that would be wrong. Let's see. So it says, it bothers me that liberalism can apply to both doctrine and politics. They tend to go together. Any thoughts about that? It tends to be because in the professional level, liberalism on the professional level is a way of bringing Marxism into institutions. So it's intentionally subversive, right? It's never about faith. Now, if you want to get far enough back in history, liberalism actually came from Roman Catholic skepticism in response to Protestants, who at that time, because debates happened slower back then, seemed to be winning the day with patristics and scriptural arguments. And just take into account that Germany and Great Britain, these Protestant countries, were quite a bit more powerful and better colleges than the Roman Catholic world at the time. But be that as it may, they were winning the day, so Roman Catholic scholars started coming up with these skeptical arguments, which became ultimately liberalism. But then German Protestants really made liberalism come into vogue. But Roman Catholicism really gobbled it up right away. John Henry Newman is obviously the result of liberalism, though he would be conservative by these days' standards. We have in the Catholic Encyclopedia, they'll like with the Immaculate Conception, they don't pretend that's what was always taught. They say, oh, well, they're saints and they're wrong. Liberalism has so infiltrated Roman Catholicism, even the conservatives are actually liberals based upon really the last conservativeness in Roman Catholicism was actually Vatican I. And ironically, because it's so ridiculous, you can't really defend it historically, it forces everyone to be liberal to defend it, and there already was liberalism. So it kind of offered the tools to do it. And so where can I join the Discord server? I refresh this link tomorrow. There'll be a link in the description of the video, and I don't know, maybe other people send the links or whatever. I don't know. Check back tomorrow. Sorry, I'm lazy. So let's see. Have you been to the Monastery of the Ledge, Francis Fair Veneration? I always wondered if it wasn't just a hoax. I haven't been there, but I have friends have been because they have cheesecakes. And I've ate their cheesecake. So it's a real place with cheesecake. That I can tell you. Let's see. Someone says, we've been focusing on so-called tradcats, but how about mainstream Novus Ordo Roman Catholics? Roman Catholics are presumably liberal and ecumenists. How can Orthodox reach them? Good question. We already have, because the standard Roman Catholic likes the Orthodox Church. They actually think we're saved just as much as we are. Some of them even think we're really the real church, and they're kind of the hanger-ons. I'm in contact with a Roman Catholic priest who, asked me to pray for him and has a very positive view of the Orthodox Church. And so we don't need the one that we already have. The question is, all right, well, how do we get them to leave Roman Catholicism? The tough part is ethnic alignment, right? You're asking people to forsake their families, in a sense, their familial histories. And so that's only done, there already is love. It's just with gently, again, with the truth, gently with love, gently with sort of, if there's something they don't like in the church and you happen to know on the personal level, how about you go to my church next Sunday? They'll say yes, because they already like the Orthodox Church. So that is more done at a personal level, not an apologetics level. They already accept that we're actually factually correct. So there's no need to argue with them. That's all the movement we're going to do with that is going to be hitting the streets, handing out tracts, talking to people, making friends, things like that. And Elijah says, I'm Greek Orthodox. And okay, so if there's any schisms to the Greek, again, it's going to have to be truth and love. And it's going to have to be a stand against ecumenism. We have to love the Orthodox Church. And sadly, the Greek government is sort of a NATO puppet, and they even pay Roman Catholic priests like Father Christian Caps to go to Greece, become uniates, to try to help bring relations between the Greek Orthodox and the Roman Catholic Church. That's mainstream Roman Catholic news. I didn't make that up. I even showed the clip in the last chill stream I did. It's right on the Catholic News Agency website. So ultimately they have to love the church more than what the government teaches and stuff. And that's why a lot of these things coincidentally align with the COVID controls. Because, right, those who just do whatever the government says will tend to go the ecumenist agenda, right? Because that is really a NATO agenda. Those who don't, for right or wrong reasons, quite frankly, a lot of people have a lot of stupid reasons to be, with all this anti-COVID stuff, is those people aren't going to go along with the program. And so ultimately, doing for the wrong reasons is wrong, but we have to love the church more than ethnic alignment, more than patriotism, things like that. All right. And I think we're almost there. Have you considered teaching an apologetics course via Patreon? The answer is no. I will not do Patreon unless I were to lose my job and I need the money to live. And I don't, I know for a fact if I had a Patreon and did little stupid videos where I make fun of people or say little special stuff or show you my icon corner or whatever, pimp myself out, I can make more money. And I give all the money to the parishes in Cambodia. Go to orthodoxchristiantheology.com/donate and donate to the churches in Cambodia. But I do not want to help build up the churches in Cambodia at the expense of people's souls. And Father Pisces is at 100% agreement with me. We both agreed what we want to avoid is televangelism, right? So we don't want pay for play. I could easily make more money with Patreon. People feel like they're part of something when they become patrons. All I can tell you is be a patron in your own mind for the sake of the people in Cambodia, for the salvation of souls, and give them money. Give hard. Every single penny goes to them. And so that's why I won't do it, is because Patreon screams commercialism. It minimizes the truth and the faith. That doesn't mean everyone who does it is bad. That's not my point. I am not going to do it. Father Pikesy and I believe that God will bless the churches in Cambodia more so if we're faithful, we let the truth do the speaking, and that people are moved to give money, not out of pride or want to belong to something. The beta's looking for an alpha wolf to follow, that they'll do it out of sheer devotion to God. So that way they get actual credit at the judgment, right? That's what's more important. Though I do find it ironic, people give money to these random people and they just stick in their pocket. Would you rather give to a good cause? Whatever. That's up to you. That's your money, not my money. I don't care. All right, I care a little, but not enough where I'm going to make an issue of it. I'll just make fun of it. Let's see. There will only be a reunion between Orthodox and Roman Catholics when the Roman Catholics admit they are wrong, convert to Orthodoxy, and that's the truth, ultimately. They're in schism. They are teaching doctrines against ecumenical councils, but by the grace of God, people can repent. I pray every day that Roman Catholics will enter the Orthodox communion. Oh, look, someone else calling out Jesuit skepticism. There you go. So it started in the Roman Catholic Church. If you care about the history of ideas. All right. So obviously the Roman Catholic Church has been subverted. To what extent has Orthodoxy been subverted? And the answer is incredibly so. And it was even worse during the communist days. And the Greek church is subverted by the Greek government. And we're seeing with COVID that the churches in America are quite a bit subverted as well. And how to stop it is people just have to be faithful. They have to pray for the hierarchs. And when they're told something unjust, like don't go to church and worship God, I absolve you from the responsibility. You just don't listen to it, because no one, no matter what clothes they wear, can tell you whether or not you worship God. All right. So it has to do with us being faithful. That's the solution. Let's see. And yes, there was an ecumenical patriarch. We had a show with Father John Wyford on ecumenism. He gives the whole history of it. So check that out in the video section. Let's see. We got Joseph Zavarian. My biggest fan. He's not even Eastern Orthodox. Thank you, Joseph. Very nice. I've seen a Go Arch blog post admitting his election was influenced by Truman. But, they would be proud of that because it shows the Greek governments and American governments close relations, right? And just so you know, Kirill of Moscow was the head of foreign relations for the Moscow Patriarchate before he became the Bishop of Moscow. So a lot of these guys are very politically connected. This is very common. All right. So let's see. It's getting late. So, all right, I'm going to do my plugs. You go to orthodoxchristiantheology.com/donate. This has blessed you. The link's right there, and I will put it in the description. So again, if this has blessed you, please give money. They're translating the liturgy. We need several hundred more dollars in order to finish publishing the second translation of the liturgy in Khmer, which is the Cambodian language. So please go to orthodoxchristiantheology.com/donate. And comes down to it, bless someone else, God will bless you. It's the right thing to do. Don't give money out of pride or want to be partisan. Give money because it helps people. So before I end this thing, I want to plug again. I want to say this to the audience. You, the audience. Christians, if you dare call yourself that, we need to be much more charitable than what we are right now. We got to make apologetics great again. It's got to be about the ideas. It's not about naming people. It's not about making fun of people. It's not about dredging up stuff from their personal lives, right? It's not about owning people. This is not Team Fortress Classic, all right? It's not about like having the best game score, all right? So I think that those who are throwing stones at others, they know very well the skeletons in their closets. Let dead dogs lie. Let's not get into that. People should respond decently or not respond at all. This also includes the Orthodox. And so for you, the audience, you could do your part. And that is by not egging people on and demanding and calling people out if they're not doing respectful discourse. And don't call them uncharitable, call them names. Say, is there a way to do this more respectfully of the other person? Or I agree with you. How do we do this in a way that's more respectful? Let's start righting this ship. Let's do the right thing, because this is a scandal to non-Christians. This is a scandal to people that could become converts. It could turn people away from the Christian faith. So this is not about making people money. This is about bringing people over to the faith of Jesus Christ, bring them into the church. All right. I want to plug again. You go to Charitable Apostolic Christian Discourse Discord server, and that's our experiment in doing this in Discord. And Discord could sure use that, because what we don't need is another cult of personality where everyone just follows whatever that person says. We don't need that. We need somewhere where people with different opinions disagree with each other, but in a nice way. So I'm going to end the show by saying this. Apologists need to hit their books, and they got to take it to the next level. All right? Enough of this lame apologetics that's been utterly disproven 1,000 times. Enough of this lame stuff that's been said 1,000 times. Let's hit the books. Let's take it to the next level. And as for everyone else, I'm going to end this show as I end all of them by quoting Jesus Sirach. Fight to death for the truth. The Lord God will fight for you. God bless you. Have a great day.